So something that came up in my video on my psychology channel is this concept of climate change grief and how a lot of people, especially Gen Zers, are feeling very anxious and depressed and just in grief over the state of the world and over global warming and oncoming doom. And I used to be one of those people that was really worried about it. I wouldn't say it took up a whole lot of space in my life, but like I've said before, I hate the heat. And so anytime it gets hot, especially in the summer or when it's abnormally hot, it makes me really angry, makes me feel really powerless. I get really sad over the idea of ecosystems and animals dying. And obviously, I also used to get anxious because I didn't want myself and my future generations of my family to die very painful deaths because of climate change. But there are a few epiphanies that I've had in the past maybe like year or so that completely changed that for me. And I'm at a place right now where I don't really freak out about climate change anymore. It doesn't really make me anxious or angry anymore. I still get sad for the animals, but I'm in a much better place with that. So in this video, I'd just like to share those epiphanies that I had in case it helps any of you guys out there. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that you need to get over your climate change grief. I think there's probably a case to be made that in feeling that grief, it can sometimes motivate us to enact change. But regardless, I'm just saying, I'm not telling you to believe these things or that you need to make these changes. I'm just sharing my story in case it helps a couple people out there. So lesson number one that I learned is that if it's not climate change that wipes us out, human-made climate change, it's going to be something else. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Yellowstone supervolcano under the Yellowstone National Park. Apparently there is this giant volcano that could erupt at any given moment, but probably won't be anytime soon. But at some point it is going to erupt. And when it's erupted in the past, it's created a very long winter that lasted a few years because ashes were covering the sky for a very long time for the majority of the United States and also parts of Canada. And so if the Yellowstone supervolcano were to erupt, it would be pretty catastrophic for the majority of North America and probably lots of other parts of the world as well. And there's not really a whole lot that we can do to stop that. Then there's always the threat of asteroids. There are asteroids that are projected to come close to Earth in the next few decades, and humans haven't really come up with a viable plan for what to do to offset that possibility. If an asteroid were to hit the Earth, it would be the impact of I can't remember how many hundreds of atomic bombs. Let's say that, humans find a way to circumvent that. There's no supervolcano that goes off. There's no asteroid that goes off. We find another habitable planet in our galaxy. The sun at some point is going to run out of sun, whatever the sun has that's keeping it warm. And if, humans figure out other places, other galaxies where there are habitable planets, from what I understand, the universe speeds up in how much it expands and at some point is going to just all implode. And so no matter what technological advances humans come up with, where we figure out to go that's safer, at some point it is all going to end for us. Now, if you're hearing this now, you might be thinking, damn, I thought this video was going to make me feel better, not worse. Now I'm terrified. For me, it's actually comforting to hear this. I'm actually less scared because of it, because it's become very clear to me that humans are just so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. I know that sometimes it can feel in our very myopic view of the world that the reason humans are here is to outlive everything and to just continue progressing and advancing, circumvent these different threats to our existence in different ways at different stages in time. But at some point, we will be wiped out completely, and it'll all mean nothing. And I do believe in optimistic nihilism, the idea that there isn't much of a point in any of it, but that's kind of a fun thing, that we don't need to take things so seriously. We can just enjoy the present for what it is and understand that just because it's going to end at some point doesn't mean it wasn't fun while it lasted. I think just putting these things in perspective can be helpful because you realize, we actually don't have that much control over things. We don't have that much power, and at some point it is going to end. So whether it's in the next 100 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, I don't know what the future holds in store for us, but it could be helpful to just realize at some point there's not anything that you can do about this, okay? There's nothing within your control, and there is something liberating in that knowledge. So this ties in perfectly with the third epiphany that I had, which is that just because something doesn't last forever doesn't mean it wasn't worth experiencing. I used to really, really struggle with this when I was younger. Anytime I would experience a really beautiful moment, like a really beautiful piece of nature or a really beautiful day where I loved the weather, I would get this sort of sorrow about the fact that it wasn't going to last forever, that it was so fleeting. I kind of felt like, what's the point? If it's not here to stay permanently, what is the point of this present beauty? Actually, Freud had a really interesting piece on this. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was on something. I'll try to find it and pop it on screen. I'm pretty sure it's available for everybody to read. But I believe he wrote it around before the Second World War started, where there were tensions rising and, death oncoming, looming over the horizon. On transience, that's what it was called, on transience. And it's basically just his reflection of like, yes, everything is transient. Nothing is going to last forever. This beautiful moment is soon going to be overshadowed by darkness. And that is the way of life. That is the cycle of life. And I like to remind myself that if it were just sunshine and rainbows and roses all of the time, then we wouldn't enjoy it. We would have nothing to compare it to. We need the dark side to enjoy the light side. We need that contrast to really know how good we have it. I think about friends of mine who have said that they don't want kids because they're scared of climate change. To me personally, I don't see that as a deterrent, because even if I have kids and let's say they only live to like 6 years old, which I'm sure they'll live long past that. But even if, something catastrophic happens when they're 6 years old and it wipes out all of humanity, I still got 6 years of joy with those kids. I still brightened my day. Just because it ended doesn't mean that it wasn't wonderful while it did last. Something doesn't have to last forever for it to have meaning to us, for it to positively impact us. I see this even with my cats. I have some family members who don't love the idea of having indoor cats, and they just don't understand it. They don't think it's worth it, and they say why do you keep them? I never had cats when I was growing up. And I tell these family members, they bring so much joy. Every single day when I journal in a season of life, every morning, the cats make it to the gratitude piece. Sometimes they make it to the connection piece. Sometimes they make it to the joy piece of my journaling technique. They truly fill my life. They make it so much better day after day after day. That joy accumulates over time. And just because at one point it's going to end doesn't mean that it wasn't wonderful while it lasted. The fourth epiphany that I've had, that I'm still kind of gathering my thoughts on, but I'm starting to believe more and more, is this idea that we are all, at the end of the day, one giant unified consciousness. The more I reflect on spirituality and the more I learn about laws of the universe, like for instance, the novel that I'm working on right now, it has to deal a lot with consciousness. And so I had to look up a lot of physics and neuroscience and philosophy for the purposes of this upcoming novel. And what I learned is that in both the spiritual stuff that I'm reading and the scientific stuff that I'm reading about this idea of consciousness is starting to point me in the direction that at the end of the day, this separation between each other, between our individual consciousnesses, is really just an illusion. A metaphor that I heard for this in the book Why Woo Woo Works is that we're all part of the same giant ocean, and our individual consciousnesses are like waves in the ocean. They rise and they fall, and when they fall, they join back to the rest of the ocean. And maybe it's not our time to rise again for an individual consciousness. We had our time, but now we're back to this unified consciousness. It really lines up with people's experiences during near-death experiences, psychedelic trips that they take. Every time we have sort of that veil ripped from before our eyes, that veil of illusion of separateness, when that veil gets removed, people start to realize, oh, we're all just one giant consciousness. And after death, yeah, our individual consciousness might not exist anymore, but the one unified consciousness continues to exist. So that also helped me kind of existentially in realizing at some point it's going to end, but maybe that's not so terrifying, because maybe it doesn't really end. I mean, maybe it ends in the way that we expect individual consciousness to end, but maybe it transforms into something different, into what you feel when you feel this overwhelming euphoria and love for all things in the universe. I hope this doesn't sound too woo-woo. It's just a spiritual belief that I'm personally developing. It is making it easier for me to deal with the idea that at some point I'm not going to be here anymore. It makes me feel like maybe it's not that scary of a thing. Because like anybody, of course, I'm scared of death. I'm terrified of my own mortality. These lessons are helping, realizing that just because it ends doesn't mean it wasn't worth it while it lasted, and also that when it does end, maybe it's not completely the end. So yeah, those were the lessons that helped me overcome my climate change grief a great deal. Like I said, you don't have to agree with me. These are just, the things that I came to realize in my personal worldview. And I hope that it does help some people out there to sort of put things in perspective. I hope you take care, and I'll see you soon.